right. Hey, welcome everybody to the Flock Squawk podcast in a interesting and reduced capacity. There are plenty of games to break down on the AFC side of the playoffs. I'm joined by my co-host, Chad Cummings. How are you doing today, Chad?
Good, Ben. Nice to talk with you. A little upset we're not going to be talking about a Ravens game, but we still had football over the weekend, and it was exciting. I love playoff football, no matter if the Ravens are in or not. So it's always fun to talk football with you, brother.
Yeah, and you know, what would a football show be without covering the biggest games with the biggest impact? You know what I mean?
Yep.
So can I start with something though? And I know that we're kind of high on the playoffs right now. Did you notice watching these games, like some of these matchups, man, were just really one-sided beat down of affairs. You had Buffalo and New England. They lost 47-17, New England. I mean, it's just like, what in the world? And then you had on the NFC side, you had Tampa Bay demolishing the Eagles. You had the Rams putting the Cardinals away. The Chiefs put the Steelers away by like 20-something points. Is it just because a lot of teams this year, was it just the NFL wasn't as strong this year? It just felt like there were a lot of upsets. The number one seed in the AFC was a team that went 12-5. I mean, it's not like they lit the world on fire with their record. It's a little different on the NFC side. The Packers are 14-3. But I mean, I don't know. What did you think of the playoff games just in general?
I could put my finger on one reason why we had two blowout games. It's that extra seed that the NFL has added just so they can, have more games, more money. You got a 7th seed, which 2 years ago wouldn't have made the playoffs, playing a 2nd seed who 2 years ago would have a bye in the playoffs. So you have, one of the better teams playing a team that shouldn't even be in the playoffs, and they're just demolished. This is the second year that format has been played in the playoffs, and the 7th seed teams are 0-4 so far, and they're just getting demolished. I wasn't expecting the Bills to blow out New England the way they did. The third time they're playing each other for the year. I expect most division matchups with teams that are, close in caliber to, be relatively close. So the home teams won. Maybe that was it.
Let's get to the AFC. We're going to start with the Bengals-Raiders game. So I picked the Raiders to win this game, and they didn't. But in my defense, I also picked San Francisco to beat Dallas, and we know what happened with that one. So it all ends up evening out in the end. It wasn't necessarily a blowout, I guess, but the Raiders were never really in this game. They lost by a touchdown because they were driving down the field towards the end of the game. I think they're on like the 9-yard line. Derek Carr snaps the ball, throws it. It gets intercepted at the end of the game, and that's a wrap on the Raiders season, right? Ends on a Derek Carr pick. They got a lot of questions going into the offseason. They're going to get a new head coach. I don't think Rich Bisaccia. Do you think Richie didn't earn his job with this one, right?
I'm seeing a lot of the players are saying like he should be the coach, but it's not up to them, obviously. And I'm hearing a lot of things on Twitter and the NFL media that he has an uphill battle to climb to actually earn that job. I would not be surprised if he's not the coach based on what I'm hearing, but what do I know?
Can I say something?
Yeah.
He was a much better head coach than Urban Meyer was in Jacksonville.
Sure was. Grinding on blinds at his bars.
Bad. What a distraction that guy was. Like, and like I don't know, just the arrogance of him thinking that he could just take over an NFL job, run it like a college thing that he's famous for doing. And then he just thought, oh, well, it'll operate the exact same way. Treated his players like shit. Trevor Lawrence was sick of it.
Yeah.
What a mistake. They got to get that one right.
I feel bad for Jacksonville fans. They have never really had a good team. I mean, it's a young franchise. They haven't won a Super Bowl, but they're a young franchise.
With Jacksonville, they had that good team in the 90s and early 2000s. It was like Mark Brunell. They had a couple of wide receivers that were really good. Oh, man. I have a Jacksonville Jaguars fan who is a friend, and he I met him in the Navy. He talks about it all the time. He was like, man, back in the days when Mark Brunell was slinging it, we had a decent defense, and they had these 2 wide receivers who were really good. And I
Yeah.
cannot for the life of me remember their name. Maybe I'll look it up. They went to the AFC Championship game a few years ago, right? They went like 13-3 and everyone was like, they beat the Steelers in the playoffs that year.
With Blake Bortles. Yeah. That's when they had they had that crazy, powerful defense with Ramsey and Campbell and a bunch of other players. And
that was kind of weird, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, first playoff win for the Bengals in 31 years.
Yeah, that's big.
Long fucking time.
Yeah, I'm happy for Bengals fans, but as a division foe, I was hoping they would lose. I also picked Vegas to win, and I mean they had a chance to tie it at the end of the game. I know Brad and a couple other people were expecting a blowout by Cincinnati. But yeah, I really thought Vegas had a chance, and it came down to the wire, and it was 4th and goal. He was forcing it to Darren Waller, I think it was, and he got picked. So it was a close game. Do you want to talk about that phantom whistle?
I think it's an argument to make NFL referees full-time employees. For people who don't know, NFL referees and these line judges and side judges and all these guys, they're part-time employees. So just from a business standpoint, if you make someone a full-time employee, they're probably going to dedicate more of their time and more of their energy into learning the game, learning the craft. If you make these guys full-time employees, they would have nothing else to do but study the rule book and understand why in certain situations you can't be blowing the whistle. If you think he stepped out of bounds, just fucking review it. Isn't that the whole point why we have instant replay? Could it have been from the crowd? Have they confirmed that it is definitely from the referee crew?
Oh, yeah, that definitely was the referee crew. Yeah.
Because there was that floating around there too. Like, maybe some asshole fan was down near one of the microphones. He blew a whistle to, just be a dick. And then they picked it up. There's just no excuse for it, man. And then to not blatantly not follow the rule. It just seems like the rule is clear. If the whistle is blown, the play is automatically ruled dead.
The whistle was blown after he threw the ball and before he stepped out of bounds, obviously. I mean, it was a great play by Joe Burrow. I've never seen a touchdown pass where half his body is, out of the field. And so it was a clean play. In my opinion, I think the whistle was blown like 1/8 of a second before it touches the receiver's hands. Did it really affect the defense? Did they really have an opportunity to prevent the receiver from catching the ball? It didn't look like it. And from my point of view, in my opinion, I think it's a clean play. I don't think it should have been overturned. It was a touchdown, in my opinion. Refs are humans. They always make a mistake. Some are more blatant. I agree. Some should be reviewable. Someone upstairs or someone in New York needs to be like, hey, you guys need to review this play. I mean, I don't think that was a huge mistake. You got a guy running and stepping out of bounds, and then the whistle's blown after he steps out of bounds. Ball was already in the air. The ball was already halfway to the receiver before the whistle. You can hear the whistle. So did the defense really hear the whistle and stop in that split second, or what do you think?
I think the defender was beat.
Yeah, I agree.
On the play, it just seemed like it was. The reason that I missed the whistle the first time was because when I watched Joe Burrow make that pass, I was thinking about the next 20 years of my life and how I'm going to have to watch this motherfucker twice a year, play the Ravens twice a year. And if we don't have our secondary healthy, he's going to shred us for 40 points. I've talked about it on podcasts before, but it's an exciting time in the AFC North because we're finishing a transition. With Big Ben retiring, the AFC North is moving into a completely different direction. I really think that Joe Burrow, just the way that he talks, he was saying in a press conference after the game, like, yeah, I mean, this is it was a good win, but it was just a win to go where we needed to go. He was like, frankly, this is the standard. Every year now. Like, we get to this point or we failed and we have to go back and we have to reassess what we're doing.
Yeah.
He's a fucking second-year quarterback. And the first year that we watched him, Chad, I think it's safe to say, like, I think the speed of the game was a little much for him and he had a bad offensive line. So those two things combined quickly.
And a first-time head coach too.
First-time head coach, absolutely, right? So he's learning the system. He gets injured, so he misses the season. He came back this year, and I watched Joe Burrow play, and it's like the pass rush is nothing. He gets the ball out so quickly now. Jamar Chase, his boy from college, That shit works
Yeah.
at the NFL level. When he threw that ball, that's what I was thinking. I was like, fuck, this is going to be the next 20 years of my life. It's hard, man. I think NFL referees have a really tough time doing what they're doing. I think it would help if they made them full-time employees. I really think that would help the situation in general. And there are people that argue that it wouldn't help at all. And I guess in this situation, the guy calls the whistle because he thinks he stepped out of bounds while the ball's in the air. The guy who's blowing the whistle is probably not looking at the ball. It's probably some other judge watching that. So it's a question of, do you follow the rules, strictly and tightly, or do you look at the situation and be like, there's no way we can make that particular decision, you know? So
the rule says when the whistle is blown, the play is dead. So I mean, I get the argument. It shouldn't have counted, even though, in my opinion, it wouldn't have affected the play either way. That was a Bengals touchdown. If there was a whistle or not, the defenders didn't have a chance to get the ball. And Joe threw a great ball with half his body out of bounds before he touched down, which was pretty cool to see. And I was watching it without audio because family was, and we're just chit-chatting. So I didn't even hear the play or see. I didn't know there was like a controversy going on. I just saw a touchdown. Yeah, I was way off about the Bengals in our preseason. I was like, Joe Burrow's coming off a huge knee injury, like multiple ligament tears, a second-year coach. They picked Jamar Chase in the first round over Penei Sewell, one of the better offense tackles or offense linemen in the draft available in the last couple of years. They chose the wide receiver over a tackle when they had such a horrible offensive line the year prior. And I was just thinking typical Bengals, man, making horrible decisions. And rather than protecting their quarterback who's coming off knee surgery, they, get him a toy that he won't be able to pass to because he's going to be sacked every play because his offensive line is trash. But that wasn't the case. They're a playoff caliber team. They won their first playoff game. I think it ends this week, though, hopefully. And
does it put pressure on Lamar Jackson?
You have a division rival that is successful. It's a new generation of quarterbacks, like you said. Big Ben finally is gone. So this whole division is about to be all new quarterbacks. They love that gunslinger, pocket passer quarterback style. People love that still. And they still don't believe Lamar can get it done with his running ability and stuff like that. So they're going to be like, Joe Burrow is the better quarterback in the league. Does Lamar Jackson care about that? I don't know. Do I care about that? I do as a fan, but I also know how the Ravens do. We have the best seasons when we're considered the underdog. I think he's more worried about getting healthy so he can, come back and play next year. I doubt he even cares about all the other stuff going on. I mean, he has.
Yeah, I doubt he cares.
Yeah.
I think it's going to become a media narrative. I think eventually they were sort of doing it with Lamar, Baker Mayfield and Lamar before Joe Burrow came along. They were trying to make it seem like these were the two that were going to come in and take the division. With Joe Burrow in the mix, I think that becomes, and with Baker Mayfield's status as a starting quarterback up in the air, that's another thing that's happening in the AFC North where that job could be open. I think they bring him back. Yeah. He had a shoulder injury. I mean, give him another shot. And if he doesn't impress you again, but it's just, there's a lot of noise around Baker Mayfield right now too. So I guess it's just a different era is starting with the way that these teams are going. And it's really exciting to watch because we're going to get some really good football out of it. Can I say something about the Bengals though, that concerns me? They're not good in the red zone. Okay. You remember the play where Derek Carr, he gets stripped, they recover it. They work the ball down. I think it sounded like the 10-yard line and they end up settling for 3. For whatever reason, they just kind of stall out and they settle for 3 when they should be getting touchdowns. And that's concerning because we just saw what the Bills did, right? Yeah. 7 straight touchdowns, 7 straight touchdown possessions. The Chiefs, at one point in the Steelers game, they had 6 straight touchdowns. So that kind of concerns me for the Bengals offense. And they don't run the ball well. Joe Mixon has not had a good game at running back really since week 12. It makes me wonder if they missed Giovanni Bernard a little bit. You remember when Gio Bernard was in their backfield and you were like, oh, fuck, like the Bengals can run the ball and the Browns can run the ball because they had Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt.
Yep.
And it was like, oh, damn, I wonder if they missed Gio Bernard 2 years after getting traded to Tampa. You remember in the last podcast, I said Evan McPherson had a groin injury. I was wrong about that.
The kicker?
Yeah, the kicker. He kicks 4 field goals. The Raiders snuck into the playoffs. Good for them. They made a good showing. They only lost by 7. And when you compare it to all the other games this weekend, I mean, I guess you can take away a win from that.
Yeah.
One last question before we move on to the Bills New England game. And it goes back to the Raiders. Could we have another Harbaugh in the NFL? It seems like a lot of rumors are floating around that he could get pulled to that job. Do you think that he's a front runner candidate? And if that's the case, that would be kind of interesting. They'd be in the same division or at the same conference.
Same conference, right? Yeah. I mean, I know he's having success in Michigan and he's making a lot of money. I haven't seen any reports that he wants to go back into the NFL. Obviously, he's a great coach. He took an NFL team to the Super Bowl. Is there 6 vacancies right now? 6 or 7?
A lot.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of teams that want him. It would be cool. That's just a cool, thing that there's 2 brothers head coaches in the NFL. I mean, it happened for 3 years. Between 2010 to 2013, it would be even crazier if he comes back in there in the same conference because, that's more opportunity for them to play each other. Maybe Jim does want to come back just so he can say he can beat his brother.
Jim Harbaugh in Las Vegas.
Yeah. I mean, he's
an electric combination.
It is because he is he is a personality and Vegas
is a personality. Let's move on to the massacre that was the Bills New England game. You talked earlier in the pod about it's weird that you thought the game wasn't closer because they had played each other 2 times previous.
Mm-hmm.
I actually think that helped the Bills in this game. I think the more you see an opponent and see what works, I mean, they beat the shit out of them earlier in the year, right? We broke that down in the previous podcast for the wild-card round. And it just seemed like they knew what the formula was going to be to beat these guys. I mean, they made New England's front look completely ineffective.
Yeah.
The secondary was horrible. They looked unprepared. It was freezing cold there. Mm-hmm. Mac Jones threw 2 touchdown passes, but the 2 touchdown passes that he threw, one was to cut the lead to 33-10. So they were down by 23 points. The second touchdown he scored, he made the score 47-17, 30-point deficit. I mean,
garbage time touchdowns. Yep.
And he threw 2. The interceptions that he threw, the one that he threw to Micah Hyde when Micah Hyde just makes an unbelievable play on the ball.
That was a great pass. Yeah. That was a great throw. It was a great intercept. Great play on the ball by Micah Hyde. That was a hell of an interception. I know. Yeah. And it's not even Mac Jones's fault. Maybe he could have thrown it a little to the outside, but that's being really nitpicky. Yeah. Right? I thought that ball was in a good spot for him. The receiver just has to turn around and catch it. Mm-hmm. And Micah Hyde just makes this great. And it totally flipped the game at that point. Yeah. Because that was their first drive. Their first drive. And they were, they were looking good. I mean, that could have been a 7-7. That could have made it a 7-7 game right there. But what happened after that? 6 more Bills touchdowns and just a couple more touchdowns, garbage touchdowns for them. Have you ever seen Belichick's defense get scored 7 touchdowns in a row?
No, it's never happened.
Especially in a playoff game.
It was the largest margin of defeat in the Bill Belichick era. It's unreal. They're the first team in the Super Bowl era to score on each of its 7 possessions that didn't end in a kneel down. Mm-hmm. They had no answer.
None.
For these guys. Now, to be fair, I think this is an example of 2 ships passing in the night, right? New England was playing like dog shit at the end of the year. And I even said it in the previous pod. I was like, look, they're not playing very well. And Buffalo is playing amazing. Why do we think I had 24-20. I didn't have a blowout, but I was like, why do we think New England is going to all of a sudden flip the switch in the playoffs in Buffalo when it's 5 degrees outside and you're on the road? So the Bills were surging. So you had that ship coming in the other direction. And this is what you get, just like a 30-point demolition derby. I mean, there's not much more to say. Josh Allen had a perfect passer rating. He was 21-25, 308 yards, and threw 5 touchdown passes. Mm-hmm. Them and the Chiefs, they're the same team. I can't wait to break down this matchup. They're the exact same team. We should play a game where I say a player on the Chiefs or you say a player on the Chiefs, and I can match them with a player on the Bills. They're the same
Yeah.
team. Are they the best team in the AFC though? What do you think about that?
The Bills,
Yeah.
they're top two. I think it's KC then the Bills, and they're not close behind. It's more like a 1A 1B.
Anything else? I mean, I thought there's not much more to say. They got the brakes beat off of them.
Yeah.
Sorry, Bill. See you
Yeah.
next year. You got to figure out what you're going to do with all these free agents that you sign in the offseason. I'm sure most of them are coming back, but who knows? He might be cutting bait with some of them. And then we'll just see how the Bills continue their season. We're going to go to the Kansas City-Pittsburgh game, the game that made me happy. Watching Big Ben get outscored by twice as many points and him knowing that was going to happen. Mm-hmm. He said before the game, this team isn't very good. Like, we should just go out there and have fun. I don't think getting your ass kicked by 3 touchdowns is very fun on a professional level. Do you?
They'd rather be there than not being in the playoffs, but they didn't have a chance in hell to win, in my opinion. The game started out pretty slow for both teams, and the first score was a defensive touchdown for TJ Watt. He's the best. He's obviously the MVP of their team, and he should be the defensive MVP of the year, in my opinion. He single-handedly beat us the first time the Ravens played them.
Why is really, Chad, if you think about how he disrupted Tyler Huntley a few times in the red zone?
Yeah, well, yeah. That's what I was about to say. Then he ties the all-time sack record against the Ravens the second time we play. And, he was disruptive in that game as well. So the first half, I was like, what's going on? They got the defensive touchdown, but then Mahomes and company got it cooking, man. Just like bombs. Travis Kelce getting involved. Then Kelce threw a touchdown later, and that was like when they were like 3 touchdowns ahead. Kelce was throwing touchdowns. They're throwing touchdowns to their linemen. It was crazy. It was fun. It was fun to watch because I wanted Big Ben to go down by a lot, and he didn't ride off into the sunset like Ray Lewis did.
So let's talk about this last stretch of Ben Roethlisberger's career, just within these like past 4 or 5 games.
Yeah.
Still a pretty good way to close out your career. Everyone thinks you're washed up. You somehow get into the playoffs.
Yeah.
Weird things happen. You go up against like a guy who's probably going to go down as at least a top 5 quarterback ever. I think if Patrick Mahomes keeps going the way he's going, there's no reason to not believe that. He loses. He says that he acknowledges that they're probably going to lose, and they do lose.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't think it's necessarily like, it's not a Ray Lewis ending. It's not a Peyton Manning ending. It's not a bad one though for Big Ben, I guess, just being there in the first place.
The organization paid him to do it. So more power to him, Shit.
Yeah, for sure. And they didn't have a losing season, 9-7-1.
Yeah, exactly.
Even worse. I don't know. It was a decline from their previous season when they went 11-5, but
yeah.
Still, I mean, they worked with what they got and they were able to make something happen. I do agree with you on TJ Watt for Defensive Player of the Year. I think it's pretty obvious. Every single game he's in, he's a guy that, how I described Joe Burrow earlier, the next 20 years, I got to deal with this guy.
Yeah.
For him, it'll probably be like the next 10 because he's banging, he's using his body a little bit more than a quarterback does. But he's another guy that we're just going to have to fucking deal with for a decade. We need a guy on the defense that's like that, a force of nature, a Micah Parsons. Patrick Queen is great. I like Patrick Queen a lot. I don't know if he's at that level though yet. Mm-hmm. And I wish we had one of those guys that's like a Ray Lewis or an Ed Reed in the secondary. That might be a better option because if we're still thin in our secondary and we pick up a guy in the draft, it's a lot to say he could be the next Deion Sanders, but it would be cool to have maybe a guy who has an understanding of defensive football the way Ed Reed did or Ray Lewis did.
Sure.
I'd love one of those guys.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what else is there to say? Travis Kelce, 108 yards, and he had a touchdown, and he threw a touchdown. They threw a touchdown to an offensive lineman during this game. They were just toying with them. It must be so fun to play in Andy Reid's offense and have Patrick Mahomes as your quarterback because you can do anything you want, right?
Mm-hmm. Buffalo Bills have to prepare for Travis Kelce throwing the ball. They got to prepare for the lineman coming out, blocking and then coming out and catching a touchdown. I was surprised, though, with the amount of times they did do the Wildcat.
Yeah.
Then that's how the Steelers got that first touchdown off the fumble. I was like, you got the best quarterback in the league, and you're running the Wildcat.
They like that McKinnon guy.
Yeah, I mean, I get it in the red zone. Like, that makes sense to do every once in a while. But they were like, what, at the 40-yard line when they fumbled the ball or something like that? On their 40 around, it was midfield area. I was like, dang, what are you doing? Why is Mahomes not under center right now? That was the only hiccup that I saw. I don't think Clyde Edwards-Helaire gets his job back as the starting running back. Jared McKinney, he looks a lot more explosive than Clyde Edwards-Helaire has the last couple of years. So,
and a running back dealing with a shoulder injury too.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. But I will say this. At one point, Chad, the score was 7-0.
Yep.
Less than 6 minutes later, the score was 21-7. And the other team had scored the 21 points.
Yeah.